All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to an exciting continuation to the two past classes. This is the third installment of this phenomenal download of 2026, of this year, of this powerful, buzzing Moshiach light and Moshiach energy, and that I'm here and I'd love to share with all of you. This is part 3. Now, these classes are very deeply or very essentially integrated one with the other. So I highly recommend not listening to this class until you go back to part number 1 and part number 2. Please listen to it in a sequence. And each one is about an hour. We're not trying not to go over an hour. As I told you in the first class, I'm setting my alarm, which I usually never do. And so that we stick to the hour, trying to capture at least, this is a vast subject. It's one idea, but with many, many components, and trying to fill in each one of these components in its own class. Yesterday, the first 2 classes given on Sunday and on Monday were very much an overview of everything that we're going to talk about. And now we're going to start delving in and going deep into each part of these elements. And that's why it's important that you listen to part 1 and 2, because it's going to help very much create the outer outline in which we should have, the listener should have to help you be with me, because I am going to share first of all, it's a lot of information, and also it's deep information, and it's going to get deeper as we go. So in order that you don't lose focus, you can see it all, and it's all about tying it all together. Please listen to class 1 and class 2. Now we are going to continue before we begin delving in this class, which I've called this class as the 45-year window for Moshiach, 1982 to 2027. Let me be very clear from the beginning. I am not saying that as an absolute, that's, the time of, that Mashiach can't come afterwards or whatever, God forbid. And we're dealing with Kate's end time. You got to be very careful. I'm just making a very, very reasonable suggestion, which I gave classes on already this year earlier, but we're going to go through it. We're going to do a more of a brief version of it today, and as much as we need to help us understand about the enormous changes that are happening in the world and why the footsteps of Mashiach are getting quicker and faster, and we're hearing the thumps. We're watching powerful Mashiach events in this world. We might call end time. I hate the term end time, because it's beginning time events, because they're really the time of Mashiach is going to be the beginning of the era of when we're really going to start living with joy and happiness and meaningful in a way that's enlightened to all of us. So it's a very, very exciting time to be. But recently, and especially, we're watching just this week, the fall of the regimes that are falling. Iran is about to topple. Who knows where Cuba's next? And it's wild what's happening. And I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg of what is about to go down. So we're in right now at a time where everybody should be fastening their seatbelts. And I hope all of this goes down before I can even finish this series. That's my prayer. And it should all go down in a very peaceful way, without bloodshed, and because that's the way it is, in a blessed way. Okay. So I just want to conclude where we left off yesterday. Yesterday at the end of the class, I discussed with you primarily yesterday and the day before that there's a period of time of the last 250 years when powerful Mashiach energy started entering into the world, the world entered into a new phase, the last and final leg of the exile, as the world was doing its final preparations for its rectification at the time of Mashiach. And there are 2 very important fundamental parts to that, is to, first of all, establish an elevated society, which very much has been accomplished with the United States of America. And now that we're reaching the milestone of 250 years, which is very significant, as discussed in the earlier classes. And at the same time, of these 250 years, something else is going on in the world, a counter force that's trying to counter Moshiach and present an alternative kind of a messianic force in the world. And we're watching, and this is what I would like to do, that the kingdom of Malchus Beis David, the Davidic dynasty, that is with the Jewish people throughout the time of exile, but it's more concealed. And as we get closer to the time of redemption, it starts to unveil itself. It starts to become more revealed and more uncovered and becomes more identifiable. And you see the leaders of the Jewish people that lead the world to the redemption, which I am making the very strong assertive claim that this is the Chabad dynasty. Chassidism in general, it's not my claims. These are all substantiated by Chassidic teachings. And anybody with a little bit of vision and sees what's the dynamic force in the Jewish people that's uplifting the Jewish people and transforming the Jewish world and enhancing the Jewish world and is at the center of all Jewish growth, will understand that it is clearly a Chassidism, and the Chabad Chassidism is just absolutely outstanding in its accomplishment, moving and doing things that no one else has done, and moving the rest of the Jewish people behind it to follow suit in what Lubavitch and Chabad has been doing. So Lubavitch takes that center stage, and what I am making the argument is that this is not, again, it's not me making this argument. I'm quoting to you what the Chabad Rebbes themselves have said, that they are the Davidic dynasty. So it starts with with Rosh Zalman of Liadi, culminating with the seventh Chabad Rebbe. These seven tzaddikim constitute one return of the throne of Mashiach's throne in the world, the kingdom, and they are responsible for both this rectified governance or rectified society, the United States of America, which is not just America, which becomes the leader of the free world, leading the rest of the world to a rectified state of redemption. But in addition to that, fighting off the detractors or those who want to thwart this entire thing. And you can see a massive war going on that we've discussed. Now, in that war that we discussed, we said it started with Napoleon. You might argue, and I'm not making that as an absolute statement over here, just as a suggestion. Everybody's familiar with the concept that before Mashiach comes, there is a war called Gog and Magog, which kind of leads us into Mashiach's word. Now, Gog and Magog doesn't have to be concentrated to one event. It can span, decades and even centuries. So it's quite possible to make even the argument that this whole entire anti-Mashiach or spiritual warfare that is fought, manifesting in various different faces over a period at the time when the rectification is taking place, and those that are trying to knock off this rectification or to derail this entire process, this entire thing is one Gog and Magog assault. And based on that, we will say that from the Alter Rebbe's days, his antithesis, his enemy in this world, kind of his force, his counter force, was Napoleon, which I discussed earlier. The Alter Rebbe fought and gave his life to defeat him. This is going to be actually astounding once we start getting into the details of it, but we're not going to do that in today's class. It continued on with communism, fighting the previous Chabad Rebbe, the Soviet Union fighting the previous Chabad. It's the same. Main thing is that it's atheistic. That's the point. Napoleon was a huge kofar meaning he was a heretic. He hated religion. He hated belief in God, and he took all of his successes as his own. We'll see that the Alter Rebbe referred to him, the Rebbe Zalman of Liadi, referred to him as the darkest klipa possible. He referred to him, klipa meaning a shell, a dark force, concealing of God. He referred to him as equivalent to Sancherev. Sancherev was someone who was a utter, who proclaimed himself as a god. He is God. He believes in no one other than himself. That's Napoleon. And then the Soviet Union that literally oppressed the millions of Jews and wanted to uproot, and they wanted world dominance as well, and to flush God out of the world. This is very important. And as we discussed yesterday, and we will continue discussing, it has a messianic flavor to it, because it's trying to give mankind a futuristic dream, a dream of brotherhood and universal oneness and collectiveness and all this kind of thing, but it doesn't work, as we all know. It turns into tyranny. It turns into to oppression. Every type of government, including Venezuela, that wants to go the communist way, ends up becoming a literally a cesspool of corruption. It doesn't work. It's a system that doesn't work because it's not holy and it's not godly. And that's the war that later becomes the war against the Chabad Rebbes, and they are at the center of this war. And we mentioned that here's where we're continuing today. We mentioned that it culminated in 1987, where the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a certain victory, where it's a court case. Now, on the surface level, it has nothing to do with the Soviet Union. It's taking place in the federal court of the United States of America. It's a family dispute about books. But as we are going to see, and I'm not explaining that now, we will leave this for class number, this is 3, probably 4 or 5, in which we are going to come to this discussion. It's a fascinating. We've discussed it years ago, last year in classes, but we will come back to it with new information. But what's very important is that this all on January 6, 1987, the 5th day of Teves, the Rebbe was declared, or Chabad Chassidim came out victorious. The day was proclaimed as Didan Notzach. Didan Notzach means we won. And as I mentioned in yesterday's class, that the Didan Notzach that the Rebbe went along with and called it Didan Notzach was not just a Didan Notzach, we won this particular court case. It was a tremendous messianic triumph. In other words, the powers of Moshiach and the powers of the Davidic dynasty have triumphed and literally crushed the forces that came against them. This court case coincided with the complete, in 1985, as I mentioned in yesterday's class, 3 premieres of the last premieres of the Soviet Union, excluding Gorbachev, all died consecutively 3 years in a row almost, and one in 1982, one in 1984, and one in 1985. And they did not last long, and as I mentioned yesterday, they were taken down without a question by paving the way to eliminate this darkness, because Mashiach could not come to the world as the USSR is standing. This is a wall. This is a anti-God, anti-holy, monstrous, ugly, demonic force that needed to be removed from the world. And it was, and the most magical thing is it happened without bloodshed, which the Rebbe at that time pointed out, is showing you that this is Mashiach's work, that it's so minimal in doing damage to the world. Mashiach doesn't bring destruction and bloodshed to the world. Mashiach fixes the world in the most delicate manner possible. So this is very important to appreciate and to understand. So this all happened on Hey Teves. So wait a second. So as soon as that last premiere, which was Chernenko, I think, in 1985, it's exactly then that this whole fight against Lubavitch, which the intention was to delegitimize, we're going to explain that still, to delegitimize the 7th Chabad Rebbe, which is the crown jewel of the entire Chabad dynasty. This is the culminating person, the final chapter of Moshiach's presence in this world. That assault against the Rebbe started exactly at the same time when this last leader was evicted, if we might say, was sent to the other world. Gorbachev became president or premier of Russia, of the USSR, in the spring of 1985, and it's exactly at that very same time, a little earlier than that, literally a month or two earlier, that the whole saga of the contested books happened, which was I believe, not me just, it makes all the sense, that it was a spiritual a counterattack from the spirit. Again, it doesn't have to be, it wasn't necessarily consciously, deliberately done at that time by the human players down here, but by the forces of darkness that are challenging Moshiach, which they're the source of the things that are happening in this world. They came, and in other words, as the Rebbe took down the kings of the Klippa, of the impure came to take down the king of holiness, to delegitimize the Rebbe. And on Teves, the Rebbe had the victory on January 6th, 1987, the United States, and it came through the United States, as we're going to see, because the United States is on the team of holiness and goodness when the United States stays true to its founding fathers, which is one of the things that Chabad Rebbe's fought for. So we're going to touch upon that, and all this is going to become clear. Now, where I want to add on, which is very important, that this day, to further prove, and one of the points we are going to introduce in our court of, I'm just introducing all the items that we are going to analyze, is that day, Hebrew day of Hey Teves, gets etched in history as a day of triumphant Moshiach, a triumphant Moshiach. Why? How do we know that? What's the evidence? The evidence is that another two important triumphs for Moshiach in this world happened over the course of the next 30 years. On that very day, amazing events which have to do with the complete victory of Moshiach over evil. The empires of evil being defeated. The first one happened 88, 89, 90, 91, 92. The first one happened 4 years. 4 years. 4 years later. Actually, 5 years. It's almost 5 years. 5 years later, in December of 1991. And this happened because January 6, 1987. So it's almost a complete 5 years. A few days less than 5 years. 5 years after the Rebbe's great victory of Didan Notzach, of Hey Teves, of the 5th day of Teves, on that day, that very same day on the Hebrew calendar, a massive event that has to do with exactly what we're talking about. The official dissolution or the official canceling of the USSR was officially, legally approved. And that was on the 5th day of Teves in 5752, Tafshin Nun Beis, which corresponds to December 12th, 1991. There is something called the Belovzha, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, the Belovzha Accords. Okay, it's some Russian name, right? The Belovzha Accords. What were they? The main countries that were unified as part of the USSR there are many, but there were three big ones. Is obviously Russia, the other one is Ukraine, and the other one is Belarus. And I think it was only these three. From what I saw on Wikipedia, I didn't research it to a greater degree. They had a signing. Now, the initial signing between these three countries happened on December 8th, a few days before, 4 days before. In 1991, December 8th, the leaders of these three governments, so to speak, all under the USSR, got together and signed that they are dissolving this union called the USSR. But the official Kremlin, Russia itself was the main power over here. The Kremlin officially ratified and put their stamp of approval on it on December 12th. So the complete the complete disintegration and the final cancellation, if we might say, of the USSR, which was this mighty powerful force of oppression and darkness in this world, dissolved on which day? Hey Teves, the day that 5 years earlier was the Rebbe's Didan Notzach. So this is not a coincidence. Now, we would think that once the USSR dissolved, we're living in scot-free Moshiach. We're ready for Geulah, we're ready for light, and mankind goes into the golden age of the Geulah, of the redemption. Yet we see that the war is not over, and the battle is not over. And here is where the Islamic, suddenly the powers of evil take on a new form, in the form of extreme Islam. The Palestinian cause, in other words, we're getting closer to Israel. We're getting closer to the return to Israel. We're getting closer to the building of the temple. Remember what I told you, what I shared with you yesterday, that the Rebbe turned around a day, a week, that Shabbat, that Shabbos, that Saturday, after the 1987 victory, and the Rebbe said we entered a new era. We entered an era where right now there's nothing left to do but to welcome the Holy Temple, and which is going to be built through Moshiach. So we are now already, the spotlight goes to Israel, and the spotlight goes to the temple. That is ready now. There's a certain end to the forces, to the empires of exile. They're ended. We've knocked the nail in the coffin of those empires of exile. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a fight to the death to stop the building of the Holy Temple. Here is where Islam is going to raise its, the extreme Islam is going to raise its ugly head and create and march on Jerusalem, so to speak, with Al-Aqsa at its center. And in order to justify all of that, it's going to take the form of the Palestinian cause, which the entire communist world is going to rally behind it with, and now you're watching over the last couple of years how this has become one of the most the anti-God movement in the world has completely rallied behind the Palestinian cause to free Palestine, which basically means from the river to the sea, get the Jews out of Israel so that we can keep the world in darkness and we can keep the world godless forever. So this is really what you're watching. Now, this kind of becomes the next battle, which becomes global terrorism, 9/11, all this chaos and all this ferocious bloodshed and a war that's going on with, and then leading up through all the intifadas, eventually leading us to, and there were many wars in Israel, eventually leaving us to October 7th and leading us to kind of now. Now, what we are watching right now is the collapse of that entire Islamic network with its support systems. It's beginning to crumble. Now, Iran is at the center of that, right? And Iran has its proxies, which were kind of its tentacles of the evil octopus. It has all of its forces, whether it's Hezbollah, it had Syria with it, it had the Houthis and whatever, all Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas, what they call it, Islamic, that's the other group, whatever, I don't even remember all the names. And Venezuela, and you have many communist countries kind of that are in the background, as we discussed in the earlier classes, giving financial support, giving their territories for terrorist programming, allowing for helping these terrorists get around the world through supplying them with passports and cover, and all this. It's one big network that's, again, it's this same evil that's trying to stop the redemption. Okay? Now we're watching it one by one, the dominoes are falling. Literally, it's collapsing. It has to do with the Zohar that I discussed last year a lot, which I'm not going to go into, which predicts actually a very short period of time, which all of it will fall. And we saw last year that exactly in that period of time, it was a 70-day period where it begins with Nasrallah and Hezbollah having taken a devastating hit, and a month and a half later, Assad's regime falls and collapses, and Assad has to escape to Moscow, barely alive, making it out alive. And then Hamas is decimated. The Houthis have gotten like really clobbered. The nuclear capabilities of Iran were knocked out in a miraculous war of a 12-day war with Israel, which is also like everything is so spectacular, like unbelievable. The United States gets involved at the 11th hour, knocking out what do they call it? Midnight hammer. Awesome. It's like reminds us of Egypt. Like midnight hammer, like bang, taking them out. And it's all this sequence of these power. And now culminating with the entrance of 2026, which as we said is God's name, and the first day, the first Shabbos, the first holy day on 2026, and boom, another one of these kingpins of evil is just in a stunning way captured, him and his wife, flown to the United States of America without blood. It's like so crazy. We're watching an impossible movie go down. It's so astounding. And in the midst of this all, as we discussed, the Iranian regime, which is the core of all this evil, is literally barely standing on one foot through divine intervention. You realize it's because of the enormous drought that God keeps the water back from them, literally bringing them to the brink of collapse. And at the same time, some other elements that are factors, which are purely God doing directly, what I'm saying, not even with human intervention, along with some, it's all coming together in the collapse of evil. Now, these pieces all fall, one falls after the other. It's interesting to see what's going to happen with Cuba soon. It's interesting to watch what's going to be with North Korea. We're watching. It's coming down. There is no question. The empire of evil is falling. But one of the crucial pieces, the first domino that really fell, which needed to be taken out for the entire collapse of this entire thing to happen. Sometimes, you have this infrastructure, you pull one piece and everything starts to get weak, was an event that happened on January 3rd, 2020. The architect, designer of this entire network of nations that were fighting Israel, the entire Iranian, what we call it, network, that is kind of was seeking to literally choke off Israel, was all built up, and we're talking about economically, militarily, strategically, by one person. And his name is Qasem Soleimani. And in 2020, God using his hammer. I once, during Trump's first term, I coined the phrase regarding Trump because I had a deep sense that he would be, from 2016, that he would be, and I spoke so many things that we haven't even spoken about now, like phenomenal connections, that he would be God's powerful agent to break a whole lot of evil in this world. For that, he has to have a little bit of a thug-like character because, from the famous fifth, he can't be a refined, elegant, very, very a gentleman. It's not going to work. To go heads on with evil, you need to have gall, you need to have chutzpah, and you need to have a certain measure of I couldn't care less what anybody thinks. And that's a perfect character that God has blessed him with. And it's being used, thank God, for good things. Okay? And I'm not getting into Trump politics because it's not a subject that we really need to go to. And I'm not necessarily supporting everything he does. Okay? But I'm just saying in general. So I coined the phrase then as a klipa buster. He's literally there as busting the klipa. So one of the things that he decided to do, which he took a lot of flack in America against, it was seemingly to be against his idea of America first. He's meddling in affairs of the world. Was that he had the gall to go and eliminate Qasem Soleimani. Like Qasem Soleimani was untouchable. He was the notorious figure. Israel trembled of him, in a sense, and yet Trump just took him out. When did he take him out? On January 3rd, 2020. If you look up when January 3rd, 2020 is, turns out it's the night following Hey Teves. It was 2 a.m. over there in some, I think it was in Iraq where he attacked them. In Iraq or I think it was in Iraq, where they attacked his envoy, and he was killed. In New York at the time, it was 6 p.m. New York time, which is just literally at the conclusion of the 5th day of Teves. Now, it's very important to realize that in all Hasidic holidays, the Rebbe himself, whenever he commemorated any special day, most of these commemorations would happen the evening following the day, because there is a concept that even though it's the next date already, but regarding to holy matters, sacrificial animals in the temple, the night goes after the day. So the Rebbe would always celebrate the great days at the conclusion. So there's no question that Motzai, as we call it Motzai, it's like the end of Shabbos, or the end of a holiday still has the qualities of the holiday. So this was really, again, another event that happened on the 5th of Teves. But it's not just, I'd like people to notice something really interesting. If this is that first piece of the domino to fall, it weakened the entire, Iran never recovered from Soleimani's death, because he was the one man who had all the information. So they became enormously weakened with this man, and it's very, very possible that so much of everything, it's not just possible, it is without a question that the final collapse that we're watching now is because of that screw was loosened. Back then it was taken out, and the whole Iranian, how would they call it? The whole Iranian, what do you call it? Network lost its architect, and it became much weaker. But why is that so important? Because if we are saying that when the Rebbe said, Didan Notzach, we won the battle, it's done, he raised the flag for Moshiach's victory over the forces of darkness, and that was on that day, it means it has already been spiritually accomplished. It just needs to manifest, and it needs to unfold. 5 years later, the complete USSR comes collapsing down and dissolved. And then, how many years later? 2020 versus 1987. So 1987, 33 years later, from 1987 to 2020, 33 years later, which is, by the way, the amount of time that King David was king in Jerusalem. 33 is an interesting number in the Davidic dynasty. So 33 years later after, and King David particularly is the one who wages the wars for Moshiach. He's the one conducting the wars of God, Yilcham Mechamas Hashem, fighting the wars, messianic battles. Who do we see as God's warrior? It's King David. And King David happened to be king for 33 years. So this is exactly 33 years later on Hey Teves. It's an important number. Boom! The last and final affront that's fighting Mashiach, the nucleus of it gets hit. That's the point. The leader of it all gets hit bullseye and taken out. And now what we are watching is the rest crumbling. 4 years later, 5 years later, it's all collapsing and it's all coming down. I mean, what was that in 2020? 6 years later, starting from 5 years later. So this is like phenomenal. This is all what I said till now is the continuation of completing the facts from yesterday's class. Now, at this point in the class, I'd like to begin what we might say a deep dive into actually explaining like these concepts from a much deeper understanding and realizing like what all this really means. The question is, why now? Why are we seeing the resurgence of Mashiach in the world, the vibrations of Mashiach, the frequency of Mashiach being so intense right now? Why are we watching things picked up? There is no question that things picked up. If I was to look when things picked up, the Rebbe was said Mashiach now in the 1980s. And the 1990s, the Rebbe stood and pointed to a whole series of events of the world that the Rebbe said were directly influenced by Mashiach himself. The fall of communism, the Rebbe said, was done. No, the Rebbe didn't say it on the fall. The Rebbe said the fall of communism is the beginning of Mashiach's influence in the world. The Rebbe also pointed at a Persian war against taking down Saddam Hussein as a messianic event. But one of the direct things that the Rebbe spoke about at that time was that Mashiach was bringing the United States with Russia to denuclearize, which is directly, the Rebbe said, influenced by Mashiach Tzidkenu himself, the man Mashiach who is, the Rebbe's saying, is present in the world already, affecting and driving world events. But 2 years later, we had the great darkness of the Rebbe not physically being here in a way that we can see him anymore. And then the world plunges into this concealment and this darkness, which, as we say, exactly at that time is when the Oslo Accords are made, kind of creating the aspirations for a Palestinian state, which causes this entire rally for Palestinian statehood, which is what is driving the Intifada and all this Jewish hatred and all this global terrorism. It's all driven. So like suddenly the world seemingly plunges back into darkness. And I would say that from 2016, from when Trump came to office the first time, we start seeing a shift and a certain pushback in an enormous way. There is no way that COVID in 2020 and the events that follow it, we still don't even know the consequences of that complete world shutdown, and the especially October 7th and Israel emerging as a superpower after October 7th, and literally becoming defeating all of its enemies. And I think it's a 7-pronged war, literally decimating everybody. And Israel coming out when all the cards are stacked against it, when the entire world comes fighting. I mean, if this is not Mashiach, like what? This is like spectacular. So, and now what's going on? So the question is, what's happening just now? Why is this getting right now so intense? And why did we see it so powerfully emerging in the 1980s, going into the beginning of the 1990s, then kind of quieting down? Quite on the contrary, the other side gains momentum and gives tremendous pushback, and now we're watching Mashiach again, full throttle, taking down all of evil, and we are to see the restoration of the Holy Temple, let it be tonight. So why now? So it's important to have context. So here's where I would like to share with you something astounding that I spoke about this year already at great length. And if you want to learn about it in a thorough manner, it would be good to explore the classes. I don't have the name of the class right now, but it's been a few months. I didn't look up what the name of the class is. Let me see if I can get that right now for you, because I'm now going to go through this very briefly, but I just wanted you, if you want to get a more thorough understanding of that, let's take a look over here, and I'll try to get that for you over here. Give me 1 second. We'll find it. To go back a few months to that discussion. Give me a second. Okay, so there's a few important classes. I think it was. Mamdani Moshiach. Can this be the final play? I don't know. I'm not sure. The truth is, let me post it on the bottom of the class. We will post it. There's another class called "Is This Year?" I'm not sure this is. Okay, I have to take a look and find what the title of that class was. Okay, but let me do it briefly over here. You see, everybody is aware that there's something called a kates. A kates means an end time, a prophecy that depicts the end time, telling us when Mashiach. The end time means when is the last time Mashiach must come by. Mashiach can come anytime if the world is worthy, with the proper tshuva, repentance, and evoking of God's compassion and God's grace. Mashiach could have come for the last 2,000 years, but there is an end time. By that time, he must arrive. So that end time is discussed in the clearest, meaning it is in the most explicit way in the book of Daniel. The entire book of Daniel is visions and prophecies regarding the full scope of human history, primarily the time of exile. From the last 2,000 years, all the empires that will dominate earth, leading up to the final dominion of the last and final evil, one of the beasts that he sees over there. Finally, there is the question of all the suffering that is asked. In the words of Daniel, when is the end going to be? And Daniel is shown by an angel, the angel Gabriel, who reveals to him literally when the end time is. However, he says it to him in a cryptic way, and it says specifically over there that people are going to go crazy trying to decipher and to decode this code that I'm giving you, but they're not going to figure it out. However, the Zohar says, as I discussed earlier this year, that in the end of days, it's going to become common knowledge. Right before Mashiach comes, it's going to become so obvious that everybody will know it. So with that in mind, I shared with you what I believe is the decode of the deciphering of this. And again, this was not my chiddush. It wasn't my discovery. I told you then I took this from Rabbi Isser Zalman Weisberg, famous on YouTube. You can watch his videos. Fascinating stuff. And over there, he, a couple of years ago, came out with that he cracked the code of the end time. Sounded like, wow, what are you, crazy? Who do you think you are? But when I listened to it, see, you have to always objective, listen to it, he made perfect sense, and his case was so clear to me. But I didn't want to believe it then because he was still giving it a few years, and I don't like that. But now we are actually right there, so I'm comfortable speaking about it. But again, I will make a disclaimer. I can't say this. No one can say anything for absolute, but the evidence is all pointing that this makes perfect sense. So therefore, it's important to understand this idea right now, because this will add so much spice and so much validity, if we might say, to everything that we're talking about of why now, what's going on now. And here is the story. In the book of Daniel, it says that this is in the end of chapter 12. He gives a date, and the date is Yamim. The time is days, Elef Masayim V'Tishim, 1290. Doesn't even say 1290 years, it just tells 1290. There's different disputes of what it means, but one of the explanations, it's years. Obviously, that's what makes the most sense. 1,290 years, that's the end date. The only thing is we don't know when to start counting 1290. So here is where everybody who was curious throughout Jewish history and could not bear anymore the pain and suffering that the Jewish people have been subject to and that the world was going through and all the misery of the dark ages. So was trying to decipher, when is this all going to end? When is God's goodness and kindness going to be bestowed upon the world? When is the world going to be godly and holy for what it was intended for? Everybody wants to know. So everybody kept on giving all kinds of calculations of what the 1290 is, and they all came up wrong. Like was told to Daniel that everybody's going to try to figure out, and they're going to come up empty-handed. Now he does say something. What does it say in the book? This is verse number 11, chapter 12. It says over there clear words. It says, Me'es husar atamid, when the constant is going to be removed. Velosis shikut shemim, and a detestable abomination or empty, hollow, detestable thing is going to be put in the place of where the constant once was. So I'm not going to go into the early interpretations, which were not correct, because you see that time passed, the 1290 passed, and it didn't happen. Or no, when I can't say it's not correct, because it was said by great rabbis and tzaddikim so it was correct on some higher level, but not manifest in this world. Okay, so the most reasonable explanation of what this is talking about is something abominable that's placed on the place where the daily sacrifices used to be done. The daily sacrifices was part of the temple of King Solomon, and later rebuilt by Koresh, Cyrus, and the Jewish people, second temple, on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount. So something detestable was put on its place. Well, do your investigation and take a look what's there right now. There is something unholy, meaning unholy. Yeah, unholy. It's something blocking our holy temple from being put there. It's not what God wants on that Temple Mount, and that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Al-Aqsa Mosque was built, and that's what's sitting there, and in the place of the Holy Temple. When was so what does it mean? From when that was built, count 1290. So if we count 1290 from when that was built, when was it built? So Al-Aqsa was built and completed in 1992. Not in 1990, I'm sorry. In the year 682. In the year 682, Al-Aqsa was completed. You can do your research online. Now, since 682 is the year, so if you count 1290, which is 1300 years minus 10 years, guess what? You get to 1982. So 1982 then becomes the end time. Now hold it. 1982 was just about 44 years ago. That's a long time ago. And we don't have yet the redemption. What we do have is a whole lot of misery and pain and death and carnage and suffering and darkness. Besides all the good things I mentioned during this time, that evil is falling, but there's no temple and there's no yet redemption to the world in the full sense of the word at all. So what happened with the 1982 prophecy? So let's first say, to support Rabbi Weisberg, and he uses this as a support. For me, this was the clincher, because I am a devout chassid and follower of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So to me, if the Rebbe endorsed it, that's all I need. So what's astounding is that in 1982, the Rebbe has what is it called? A biography. In the first book that the Rebbe gave us, called Hayom Yom, which is a biography, which is a short calendar with daily inspiring thoughts for every single day. In the introduction to there, he has a biography of all the Chabad, 7 generations of Chabad Rebbes. And in that biography, in the initial, when the Rebbe initially authored it, he didn't put his own biography because he wasn't even Rebbe yet. But when they republished it in 1982, they added at that time, and maybe they added it earlier, but this was an update of the biography of the Rebbe. So they were saying all the accomplishments that the Lubavitcher Rebbe had for the world up to that year, 1982. So when the Rebbe looked it over, the Rebbe told them to add that in 1982, the Rebbe said to publicize that 1982, it says in books, it's written in Jewish books, that this is the year of the end. This is the end time. This is the time of the Kates. Now, it's interesting that, as I mentioned in that class, the editors who were doing this asked the Rebbe which books he's referring to, because whoever said that 1982 is this end time? And the Rebbe pointed to certain sources. The editors, including Rabbi Weisberg, who's part of that editing team, searched these sources and came up with very, very barely, very weak sources. It was like sources that were hardly a source. So it was clear that the Rebbe was kind of saying it on his own, but he was trying to hide behind, because it's not recommendable to give out the end time. The rabbis were not in favor of doing that. So if the Rebbe is doing that for a reason that he knows he has to do, maybe so that we can know about it today, for a reason that we'll soon mention, the Rebbe's trying to like kind of hide behind great people in kind of endorsing it, but really it's a code that he figured out on his own, 1982. And when he says books, this is Rabbi Weisberg's idea, which I love. He says, when the Rebbe says books, which books does he mean? He means the book of Daniel. He says the books that he says, he's referring to Daniel. The Rebbe is basically saying, I figured it out. It's 1982. Good. That's great. Now, that will explain, very important, some very interesting things the Rebbe did in 1980. First of all, in 1982, and this is one of the things the Rebbe says that they should put into the biography, is that the Rebbe coined the name of that year, Tiyeh Shnas Bias Mashiach, because it was in Hebrew the year 5782, not 5782, 1982 is the year 5742 on the Hebrew calendar, which is, in Hebrew, it's Tav Shin Mem Hey, Tav Shin Mem Beis, which the Rebbe made an acronym of that, Tiyeh Shnas Bias Mashiach. And the Rebbe says, go out on the street and you'll see everybody refers to this year, Tiyeh Shnas Bias Mashiach. So you see, Mashiach is supposed to come this year. Very characteristic of the Rebbe, the way he... Go out on the street, you'll see people say, who said it? The Rebbe said it, the Rebbe introduced that idea. And by the way, the Lubavitcher Rebbe would give an acronym for every year to give it some kind of a blessing for the year. And it started that year. That year was the first year the Rebbe did it. And the next few years, every single one was all related to Mashiach. It was from Mem Beis till Nun Beis, the last 10 years that the Rebbe was with us, able to talk. The last final 2 years, the Rebbe was after a stroke, but the Rebbe would give a blessed a prognosis, so to speak, relating to Mashiach for that year. But the first year he did it was 1982, referring to the year as Bias Mashiach. Now, what you see something really amazing. If you look in the book of Daniel, it says that time, when this time will come, this time, the end time, it will be an extremely excruciatingly dangerous time for the world and dangerous for the Jewish people. And two very interesting things I want to point out. One of the things it says is that one verse before the verse of 1290, it says Yizbaradu v'yislavnu v'yitzarfu rabim, which I'm not giving you the exact translation, but it basically means there will be a massive refinement and a clarification and a cleansing that will happen in the world. In other words, everything in the world will become clear during this time. And for example, let me give just a little example of a manifestation of that. When you're watching right now in the world that everybody who has an opinion is coming out of the woodworks, like myself, I'm coming out of the woodworks. I'm sharing it with you on YouTube. It's the generation of everybody talking. Everybody can get themselves. I have a fancy schmancy microphone, but it doesn't cost you a little money, but you can get yourself a setup, get yourself a good camera, and get on there and share. And if you have what to share, so share. But what we're watching is that people are not keeping their opinions to themselves. They're sharing it. And we're getting to see what's going on in the inside. Like a lot of real dark things of a lot of people are coming out. The Jew haters are coming out. I'm sorry, I'm going to use a strong term, but that's what I feel. They're coming out like cockroaches. Like they're roaches that are sitting inside the ground and they're hidden and they emerge both on the right and on the left. Everybody's identifying themselves who they are, on which side they belong. It's becoming clear who is who. Just a few years ago, you didn't even know who the enemies of Israel were. Just today, for example, a guy in Australia, imagine this, after Bondi, a child, a person, you have 15 innocent, beautiful human beings murdered in cold blood, coming together for a Hanukkah menorah lighting, and the whole Australia is sick to their stomachs from the horrific despicableness of this action. Okay? Two adult men, a father and a son, get up there and massacre innocent people. So listen to this. A person who won an award for being a child author, writing books for children, came out, I forgot the guy's name, I don't care what his name is, Chung something, I don't know, comes out today saying, I don't get why people are mourning if you kill, what did he say? When you kill, he referred to all the people who died as fascists. If you kill fascists, it's a good thing. Imagine, it's a children's book writer. Just zip your mouth up and aren't you embarrassed? You know, he has what to say. He's telling everybody that it's a good thing that by the Hanukkah menorah lighting, because these are fascists that were all killed, anti-Israel. And the rabbi, I mean, disgusting. So this is part of this prophecy. Everything will come to the surface. People will speak their minds. And it's becoming more and more, you're seeing over the last 30 years, but recently more than ever. Now, in addition to that, it also says that it will be a dangerous time. And the only ones who are going to be saved and protected in this dark time is those that are written in the book. But it doesn't say which book. It says those that are written in a book. It says... So what's really fascinating is that in the 1980s, in 1981, 1982, the Rebbe started literally during 1981, and then the Rebbe went full throttle, crazy almost, when I say crazy, meaning with such alacrity and urgency, driving his Chassidim to get every single Jewish man or woman to purchase a letter of a Torah. And they had today they have already, I think, 13 Torah scrolls, and now I think they're on the 14th. If I'm correct, something like that, which are being written for this purpose, to have every single Jewish man, woman, and child written in as a letter of the Torah. If you don't have one yet, if you know someone that doesn't have one, you can look up Unity Torah for the Jewish children or something like that, and you'll find it, and you can buy it for like $2 it costs to buy a letter. And the Rebbe very much wanted every single person to have a letter. Now, why was the Rebbe doing this in 1982, 83? It's because it says over here, anybody written in the book. And I shared in that class that in this book, that the Rebbe himself makes the connection of the book, of him writing letters, getting the Jewish people to write letters with this prophecy in Daniel. So you see that the Rebbe is following the script of this prophecy. Now, another thing the Rebbe did in 1982 actually is in 1982 in the March, I think it was a March, Purim time of 1982, before Purim, there was a rally with the little children, which, by the way, the entire movement called Teves Hashem, which is the army of Moshiach, which the Rebbe created, the army of Hashem, which he made an army of little children. And what's the army? Children doing acts of goodness and kindness. That's doing good acts of kindness, studying Torah, beating their evil inclination. The Rebbe started this whole movement with children. And he called it an army. When did the Rebbe do this? In 1980, 81, 82. In other words, this is the final assault of Mashiach to conquer the world. But one of the things that the army of Hashem, one of their anthem songs, one of their major songs was a song called "We Want Mashiach Now." And the children would sing, "We Want Mashiach Now." And you can find the Rebbe encouraging the children, not just the children, but also then it became with the adults. And they're singing the song, "We Want Mashiach Now" with thunder. And I remember that phrase irked a lot of Jews. A lot of religious Jews. It was like feeling almost like, who are you to tell God we want? And what does it mean, Mashiach now? How about soon? No one ever thought of this, of telling God we want Mashiach now. A lot of people thought it was, and why now? Why not? Why'd you wake up with now? Why now? You see, when you're now in retrospect, when we're looking back and we're realizing that this is coinciding, the Rebbe didn't say it openly then, but it's coinciding with the book of Daniel, with the end time. So at the end time, the Rebbe is screaming now because the time has arrived. There's no reason to delay. But if so, why was it delayed? What's going on? The answer is the Rebbe knows it could be delayed. So he's calling out now. He's thundering now. It has to happen now. But why not? Why not last year? Why in the 70s didn't he say now? Because the 70s, we didn't reach that point that we can legitimately say now. But in 1982, we could say now. Hold it. But it didn't happen in 1982. So therefore, we have to follow the next verse in Daniel, which drops another date. Very important. The other date that is dropped, and my alarm is ringing already, but I'm going to finish up this last. It says the next verse as follows: Ashrei hamachaka ve'yagia, fortunate are those who waited out and will arrive. Liyamim ve'elef shloish meyos shloishim v'chamisha. Right after it says 1290, it says fortunate are those who are going to wait it out to 1335. So what's the difference between 1290 and 1335? It's 45 years. So it's a discrepancy. Hold it. You said 1982, and now, I'm sorry, you say 1290, and now it's, which comes out to the year, if this calculation we made earlier is correct, 1982. And how does it coincide with 1335? There seems to be a discrepancy. So Rashi says, fascinating. Rashi is the great commentary, biblical commentary, and also Talmudic commentary. Rashi is our main commentator of the entire Torah. Rashi says there's a 45-year discrepancy. These are 45 years additional to the 1290. And listen to these words. Sha'asad mishichenu lehiskasais achar shenigla. That our Mashiach will go into concealment after he is revealed. Which means, this Rashi is based on, Rashi himself says this, V'yashuv v'yizgala, and then he will return to reveal himself. That there is in Moshiach himself, there is a revelation, a concealment, and then a revelation again. There is a multi-revelation of Moshiach. And the in-between time is 45 years. If that's the case, 1982 is the first powerful presence of Mashiach. And when the Rebbe says, let it be the year of Bias Mashiach, he wasn't just giving a blessing. He was telling you facts. It is the year of Mashiach's arrival. And even though not necessarily everybody was paying attention, but Mashiach's arrival did happen in 1982. Explicitly said through the Rebbe himself. With all the things the Rebbe was doing at that time, and by the way, in the 1980s, anybody that follows Chabad knows that in the 1980s, the Rebbe went gung-ho, throttle forward, put the pedal to the metal, and went, up to 100 miles per hour with one madness of you might say a crazy drive rushing to the redemption, which picked up even more intensity in 1988 when his wife passed away, from 1988 till 1992. And then when the Rebbe started pointing to all these massive global events that are all already proof that Mashiach is operating in the world. Based on that, if 1982 is the first opening and then there is a concealment, when does Mashiach come back to complete the job 45 years later, which lands us, my dear friends, 2026, 2027. This is the time. This is the year. So we are right now at the conclusion of that, and that's why now is the time to really fasten our seatbelts. It's not about fastening our seatbelts, but for each and every one of us, this is important, to not just to sit back and watch this happen, but to get more active with empowering Mashiach, because Mashiach's power comes from us, by us learning more Torah, doing more mitzvahs, being more positive, being more kind, being more loving, being more caring, and learning and studying about Mashiach. That's the way we hasten it and make it happen. So that's the 45-year window, and that's why now, based on all of this, we will now revisit in detail the entire 250-year period, both in Mashiach's war against the dark side, the establishment of the United States, and everything else in a fascinating discussion. We're just getting started. Please join us for tomorrow night. We're going to do class number 4. I'm going to continue it next week with probably a few more classes, see as much as we need to be able to complete all this magnificent and very, very exciting information. Thank you. And meanwhile, let us have Mashiach way before we get to that.